Hey, welcome to our Really Awesome podcast from a different location. As you can see this, you might not know what this is, but it's a corner of a hotel room in Marquette, Michigan. I'm on a road trip with my friend Steve Tubman. And today I'm so excited. I have just an amazing guest who went through a time of profound struggle, which could have limited the rest of her life, but she chose a different path. But I'm so excited for you to meet her. But first, the promo and her trailer or whatever, and I'm supposed to just do that seamlessly, but I didn't do it seamlessly. So here you go. Anyway, okay.
Today's guest, Alison Pena.
Let me tell you a bit about Alison Pena. After losing her husband to pancreatic cancer, Alison designed new ways to re-engage, reinvent, and rebuild her life. Now she helps people who have suffered a heartbreaking loss to get back on track at work, in their relationships, and with their health, and to get the support they need to thrive again. So without further ado, let's welcome Alison Pena and give her a round of a standing ovation from all corners of the earth.
I love that.
Hey, Alison, welcome.
Thank you so much. What an intro. That was awesome.
Actually, to be technical about it, awkwardly awesome.
Absolutely. Awkwardly awesome. Spectacular.
So I like to sometimes start my guests like a bit back in their lives. When you were in, say, first through third grade, whatever, what did you dream of doing with your life?
First to third grade, from the time I was 6, I wanted to be a multimillionaire philanthropist.
From the time you were 6?
Yes.
Who was your inspiration for that?
My dad was an investment banker, and so I actually knew people who did this, and I loved the way that they were able to contribute in the world in bigger ways, and I wanted to be that person. I'm still heading in that direction. Not there yet.
Yeah, me too. I'm heading in that direction and definitely not there quite yet.
Yep.
So, in high school, did that dream change at all, or did you basically?
I would say in high school, I didn't really feel like I fit in. I was much more interested in how the people around me were doing. And I had my best friend got pregnant our senior year. And so I was much more interested in supporting her than getting good grades. I was not athletic, and I almost didn't graduate with my class because I cut so many phys ed classes. So the last 6 weeks or 2 months of my senior year, I wrote papers about how important athletics were. I ran around the reservoir multiple times. Took many gym classes. In the end, I graduated with my class, but
at least you got to write some papers about how important athletics were. I mean, we are kind of bonded in that, and I didn't know that. Like I was on the track team in 7th grade, and I was practicing hard, and then got to my first meet and wound up, and I threw the shot put backwards.
Oh, wow.
Wow. So then what? You moved into what happened after high school?
So after high school, I was kind of trying to figure out who I was and what I wanted to do. And so I took some volunteer positions. I did some work as a financial consultant at Merrill Lynch. And then when I was 25, and my brother, the next brother down from me, was 23, he died of a heart attack. That was
at 23.
At 23, yep. And it was connected with a genetic enzyme deficiency. But our parents hadn't told us this. So for me and my brothers, it was a surprise. And then I went down into a very deep depression. And my best friend was really worried about me. So when she and her husband moved out to California, her husband was going to be on the road about 95% of the time. And so because they were worried about me and to give her company, they invited me to move with them.
Is this the same friend that you helped in high school?
No.
Okay.
This is a friend I met when I did something called the S training in 82, a long time ago.
Oh, cool. I mean, and we could talk about S turning into landmark, but that's a whole different subject.
Whole different subject.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So where did you move to in California?
We moved to El Granada, which is just south of San Francisco. And neither of us knew how to drive. So we had to get driver's license because it was California.
Because, I mean, you just didn't have a reason to learn to drive in Manhattan.
Yeah. I was 25 before I got my driver's license.
So did learning to drive, was that a pretty easygoing experience for you, or not so much?
Not so much. I decided I was going to buy a Jeep. Now, I had learned on an automatic, and so I bought a manual car.
Oh.
It was a little crazy.
What prompted you to buy a manual car?
I really wanted a Jeep.
And they didn't make automatics at that time, probably.
Not for a Jeep. I wanted a Jeep more than anything. But I just learned to drive, so I wound up driving home all the way from across the mountain in first gear. So slowly. I mean, it was a mess. It was a mess. I made it, as you can see.
So from this story, we can kind of extract that when Alison is determined to do something, she did something.
Yeah,
you wanted that Jeep, and wow. So learning to drive a clutch and I wanted to say San Francisco, Silicon Valley traffic sounds.
It was challenging.
Tough.
It was definitely challenging. My mom has a story of when I was 3, and I had this nurse, and this nurse was very frustrated with me because I was a very determined child, and not much has changed. And so she pointed at me and she said, "That one, if you threw her in a stream, she'd swim up." And I still do that. I still swim up.
So what did you learn in California besides learning how to drive a stick shift that's been important to your evolution?
Well, I learned to drive a stick shift, and I was we were in this town where a bus went through twice a day, and there was nothing to do, nothing. And so there was an exercise class the next town over, and my best friend and I, we were in such good shape because there was nothing to do in this place. So we were going to exercise classes, 5 days a week or 7 days a week or something amazing. It was hilarious. It was hilarious. We had a hot tub. I learned to take banana slugs out of a hot tub.
Oh.
Yeah. They're gross.
Oh. So, and then all the while you're grieving this just sudden out of the blue happening of your brother having a heart attack.
Yeah.
How is that going for? I mean, what was that like at 25?
It was really devastating, and it was. I sort of pledged to myself that what he brought to the world, I would carry on. And so in the grieving, there was also this appreciation for the life that I still had and a real feeling that I needed to live it well because I was still here. And so I needed to live it well. And we forget about that in the face of someone dying, we appreciate life in a different way.
So in a very real sense, you used your brother's tragic death to inspire you to pay more attention to life and live more fully, huh?
Yes. But then what happens is that life goes on and you get busy with, go to work and do things and go out with friends, and you sort of forget. It fades, that experience. And you're just going along and going through the motions and doing the best you can. And then I came to be about 50, and I was working for an advertising firm doing pharmaceutical advertising, and as a proofreader. And I asked myself if this was what I was born to do. And the answer was absolutely not. And so that was another real upending.
So there's some people who get that, who ask that question and get the absolutely not, but then stay with it because it's what they know, and that's a tempting cause. What would you say to us who are tempted to keep doing things that aren't a good fit for our lives and for our purpose?
I would say once you're aware that it's not a good fit, it becomes harder and harder to stay. And so once I became sharply aware that this was not what I was born to do, and I was about to be 50, so I was halfway through my life potentially. If I wanted to live into my purpose, I needed to get going. I wasn't 20. And it became more and more and more painful to stay in my job. And in the end, I quit.
So how long from the time you realized that this wasn't a good fit until the time you moved on?
4 to 6 months.
That must have been long, 4 to 6 months. Huh?
Extremely long, 4 to 6 months. By the time I quit, so I wrote my resignation letter. I went shopping for quitting clothes.
How do you just know quitting clothes when you see them? Or is that a certain store you go to? Or?
No, I didn't know them when I saw them. I just kept going into the stores and saying, I'm looking for the clothes I'm going to quit in. And then when I found them, I bought them and then I quit.
That would be a great name for a short story or a poem, Quitting Clothes. That's brilliant.
Isn't that hilarious?
And then tell the next part of the story, because I think it's selfishly it's important to me because I most likely wouldn't have met you if this next part of the story didn't take place.
Yeah, so I went to I had a table at I
mean, back up a tiny bit and talk about what you created so you had that table.
Okay, so I created something called the Affluence Code, and what that was about was that everyone has these moments in their life when everything just works. They're being so fully themselves that they're meeting the right people, they're doing the right things, and everything just happens immediately, organically, simply. The problem is people don't know how to get there at will, whenever they want to. It's something that kind of happens.
I can attest to the challenge of getting that will. Yeah, I can vouch that it can be challenging.
Yeah, exactly. And it had puzzled me from when I was a child. Like, why couldn't everybody thrive? I did not understand it.
Why couldn't everybody thrive?
Yeah, it made no sense to me. And what I found was that people had different things that were kind of their zone of genius, what they were best at. And so some people were best at just getting stuff done at work. They were great. And the world really understands that. Those people tend to really thrive in companies. Then there were the people who were great at nurturing their one-on-one relationships. So those people might be great in customer service. But if they were in a job where they were meant to just deliver results and get things done, not so good at that. Not so good at that. So did not thrive at that. And then the last kind of person were people who were good at serving their communities and really taking care of communities. And if you were not doing what you were best at first and most, it was a struggle. You could still get there, but it was a struggle. And each one had their own way of thriving. So I started digging into what those were, and I started teaching people how to do it. And then they could get there whenever they wanted to. It was very cool. Very cool.
So yeah, and I'm a beneficiary of this. Very cool. So it's been great talking to you, Alison. Great time together. This is the end of this story. No, wait. Unfortunately, this is not the end of the story at all.
No, it was not the end of the story. So, fast forward to my husband in 2015 was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer.
Will you just briefly talk about you guys before then as a couple and stuff?
Yep. We met in 1992 at a church retreat on the Delaware Water Gap. And I was completely fed up with my life at that time. I was like, I hated my roommate. I hated my job. I was fed up with men. So I complained all the way up to the retreat. And my girlfriend said, what you need in your life is a serious relationship. And I said, you have not been listening to me. That's the last thing I need. And that night I started talking to David, who became my husband. And we talked almost all night. And then in the morning, I still had to lead groups. I was part of the church leadership. And I said, well, we should probably go to sleep now because I have to lead groups in the morning. And he said, or we could go lie on the dock and watch the sunrise. And it was like a bell went off. I knew that he was the one. It took him 4.5 years to realize the same thing. And we were married in 1996. And we were married for almost 20 years in the end. And we had a good marriage. It was a lot of ups and downs. He was an artist. At the time when we met, I worked at Merrill Lynch as a financial consultant. And eventually became what I am now, which is a grief resilience coach.
Did you and David have any inkling that you would get this news that he had pancreatic cancer?
We had no idea. It was a complete surprise. And when you hear cancer, it's a straight drop to despair. It's really, there are some cancers that mostly people survive. Prostate cancer, breast cancer, the survival rate is pretty high. Pancreatic cancer, it isn't. It's very low.
So what was the initial conversation like when a doctor told you and David that, hey?
Well, the doctor said, you need to see an oncologist today. And I remember being in the pharmacy getting prescriptions and calling up, and they said, well, you can come in 3 weeks. And I said, no, we're coming in today. So it was really shocking because from the time you get the diagnosis, when it's stage 4 pancreatic cancer, you have weeks to a few months. And you don't know how much time you have. So if you don't have a will, it's get the will. If you haven't had these conversations, get to it, because you're running out of time. It was scary. It was really scary.
So you were scared. You both were scared.
Yep.
But then how did you both handle the remainder of the time you had together?
Yeah, the doctors kept saying to slow down and to stop doing things. And we thought that was crazy. I mean, it was probably sensible. His energy diminished. He could do less. But what we decided to do instead was live full tilt boogie to the end. So if we had limited time and it was going to run out, then why would we slow down? We had limited time with each other. He had limited time to do what he loved, which was hang out with his artist friends, paint his paintings, and play tennis.
So he did that. He did that, but then you also did some things during this time too, right?
I did. So I used this affluence code that I had. My husband was focused on work, called purpose. So he needed to paint to thrive. I'm focused on community. So I needed to be with my community. So what I had on my bucket list was to speak on stage about the work that I did. And I had that on the list for 10 years.
10 years.
10 years. and sing in cabaret shows. I'd sung in gospel choirs for 15 years. So for a long time, I had these things on my bucket list, but I thought, well, I might make a fool of myself. I'm going to embarrass myself. I can't do this. And in the face of watching him get thinner and watching him lose his hair and watching all these changes happen, none of that mattered. None of that mattered. What mattered was I living and was he living to the last moment? And so I sang on 4 stages and I spoke on 3 in the 11 months before I lost him.
And this had been something you have been
Yep.
procrastinating on for a decade.
Yeah, and it was really important. I mean, one of the things that's so important when you're going through something like this is self-care and self-expression. So for me, singing was self-care. And I had to remember that I wasn't just a caregiver of someone who was dying who I loved, and that I wouldn't just be a widow. So the songs that I chose were to remind me of that. The Tuesday before he died, I sang I Will Survive, Gloria Gaynor. And I sang a song called The Secret of Happiness, which was about being present to what was going on, whatever was going on. But they were to remind me that there was more to me than this immediate heartbreaking experience, that I would make it through.
How did you do this when so much within you probably wanted to like go into the fetal position and go, why me? This is so unfair.
Well, part of it had to do with my affluence code. My first affluence code was serve a thriving community. And I thought there must be other people going through this kind of experience, that if I share my truth of what's really happening, not always pretty, then they can be comforted and know they're not alone. And so it was congruent with who I am to share from this. And singing was one way, speaking was another way.
At this time during these months, it sounds like you created a new purpose for yourself. I mean, a revised purpose.
Yeah.
That was bigger than what you were what you and David were going through.
It was really, I mean, there's kind of been a through line through my whole life. How do people thrive? And then how do they thrive after a heartbreaking loss? So how do they thrive and know they're valuable? By figuring out what's their zone of genius and doing what they're best at. And then how do you remember when you feel broken that you're not?
How do you remember when you feel broken that you're not?
Yeah, because if you say to yourself that you're broken, if you stay there, you can't recover. Whereas if you say, we were talking about resilience, if you say, I feel broken, but I am a resilient person and I can come back, I still have more life to live.
And I mean, I'm sitting on a trip in Michigan, and you're in Manhattan, and we're talking about this at a distance from each other and from these events, but when you're going through it, it must be like you must be making. It doesn't sound like you just make the choice once and then you're good to go. How often do you have to choose this path?
Over and over and over again. So the first year was what I called a wasteland of grief. And then the second, I could go 0 to rage in about 5 seconds. And I would lie in bed and I would have to think of a reason, literally think of a reason to be alive that day. Before I got out of bed, I had to think of something, some moment of joy. Because otherwise I wasn't going to make it. I mean, there were some very dark days. I'm not going to lie. There were some very dark days. And then there were days that were better. And I just had to make it through that moment, that really bad moment, and then that really bad hour, and then that really bad 6 hours. And some days were better and some days were worse. And it was just a matter of, I am a resilient human who has something still to give in the world. And I'm just going to hang in here. But I couldn't see any time when it was going to be better. Like I had no horizon. I had this dream and this plan with this man I was with who I loved for half my life. And then it was over, was gone. And I had no idea what my future was going to look like. Like I was going to be a Catwoman.
You were walking through a very thick fog and you couldn't see.
Couldn't see. I couldn't see because I had this future with my husband and then I didn't. And he left me close to 1,000 paintings. So, you know, a studio and an apartment in Manhattan from 2 incomes to 1 income. And I had to close up the studio and I moved the apartments home. I literally walked them through the streets of New York as kind of a ritual, a way to move myself along.
Wait, you literally walked each of the.
I have an 8-foot standing easel that was given to my husband that I walked through the streets, 20 blocks through the streets. I have flat files, which you kind of store paintings in, that were on a roller. I put a whole bunch of paintings on top of them that were canvases, and I rolled them through the streets. Literally rolled them through the streets. And people stopped me and they asked what I was doing. And then I could tell stories about Dave and how the paintings were made. And it was really hard and really joyful. It was very weird. But it was I needed to create some rituals to move myself to be able to see forward progress, because it was like this flat horizon. I couldn't see that I was moving forward. It didn't feel like it sometimes. So I had to make some way that I could see that something was happening.
And another thing you've talked about during this time, which I've thought back to often, is like this, you had a certain level of confusion about how to get basic things done. Can you talk a little about that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there were things that were remembering to eat. So my memory was so spotty, especially in the first 6 to 9 months after Dave died, that I had about 5 seconds once I thought that I was hungry to get to the kitchen and eat something before I forgot again.
So you would literally have to sprint to the...
run. And I couldn't count on my memory. And so I put baskets of power bars and stuff around the house so that I would have a visual cue to eat. There was a day when I went out to an appointment in my slippers. And for each of these things, what I did was I created a net. So I needed to, if I knew that there were things that I used to be able to count on that I couldn't count on, then I needed to create some way to catch those things. So after I went to an appointment, I got a block and a half in my slippers until I realized my heels were cold and went back for shoes. I put a sign up by my door: wallet, keys, coat, shoes. Which seems ridiculous, but I needed to, part of what I did was I would have a breakdown of some kind. Can't remember to eat, go out without shoes. And I would come up with a solution. So I came up with solutions for that I couldn't trust my energy. I came up with solutions for that it couldn't remember appointments. Every single thing that was a breakdown for me, I thought of a net to catch myself. Created a net. And it works. It really works. But it was crazy because people think that you can just bounce back, but you can't. And so I was a proofreader and medical editor, but I couldn't focus and I had no memory. And I was a coach who couldn't deal with people. I could not do anything that I was qualified for. But at a certain point, and this is really where clients tend to come to me, I realized I wanted a bigger life again. So I had, curled in a fetal position for a while. I mean, I needed to just take care of myself for a while. And then at some point I was like, no, I want more. But
and you say you realize that for yourself.
Yep.
Do you think, can another person help a grieving person to realize that, or is that something the grieving person has to come to on their own?
It lives in joy. So joy hurts. It hurts to feel joyful when someone is gone.
It hurts to feel joyful when someone is gone.
Yeah, and so it's because it's painful, you sort of shy away from it. But at some point, as human beings, we are joyful. We reach for joy. We reach for things that delight us. And so the way that a person who's supporting someone who's grieving can help them get to that kind of tipping point where they realize they want a bigger life is to invite them to things that will bring them joy. Because it's that reaching that does it.
Do you have examples of people inviting you to something to things that brought you joy?
Yeah, I mean, I had a time where I couldn't come home. My husband's paintings are all in the house, 800 of them. So 500 square foot studio into an 800 square foot apartment, which already had stuff in it. So add 800 paintings.
Wow.
So that was kind of the reality. And there was this one day I could not go home. And I asked some people if I could just come to their place, if I hit this moment again. And this friend, I called her up and she invited me to come over, sit on her couch, gave me tea. She gave her kids baths, talked to me. She didn't do anything with me. She didn't try to fix me. She just allowed me to be part of her life, gave me a hug. And it was everything. It was everything. Those people who allowed me to just be however I was, if I cried, let me cry. But don't treat me like I'm broken or wrong. Don't say, oh, stop that. Control yourself. In those moments, there's no controlling anything. We'd love to. It's not happening.
It sounds like your friend didn't need to be laser focused on you either. Like, she gave her kids baths, she did some other stuff. She wasn't like staring at you the whole time. Alison, how can I help you?
Yeah, exactly. And my boyfriend is a perfect example of this. I mean, I was eventually, and that this was the scariest thing of all to do. Eventually, I decided I was willing to risk love again. Now, my husband died at home in my arms. So that level of heartbreak and that level of pain and risking love again meant risking that again. But I decided I was going to get on Bumble, which is a dating app, and I was going to try. And because I didn't really know who I was without my husband, because we were together for 25 years, and because I had no idea what kind of man I would like to be with, because I was with him for 25 years, I just started looking and feeling into who I liked and who I didn't like, and making distinctions for myself. And I figured my job, the only thing that I had to do was to show them who I was as clearly as I could.
The only thing you had to do was show them who you were as clearly as you could.
Yeah, exactly. And so this man, I was nuts. I mean, I was a hot mess. I really was. Some days I would cry for 8 hours. Some days I couldn't be touched, and I couldn't have someone's arm around me. And if someone tried to kiss me, I had a panic attack. It was that bad. And so, as you can imagine, dating me was not always fun, you know? And the person I wound up with needed to be okay with me as I was.
And also needed not to take it personally when you didn't want to be touched, because it wasn't about him, right?
It wasn't about him. It wasn't about him. I mean, I remember there was a day in October, and my husband died in September, and then there were all these bad dates between September and the end of the year. So I called him up and I said, you might not want to see me until January. Then I'll be a little less crazy. In January, I'll be less crazy. And he said, okay. And then 2 days later, I called him up and I invited him to go to the Museum of Modern Art with me and see a movie that my cousin was putting on with my mother. So this man was dealing with a roller coaster for a long time. And he was just willing. And one just brilliant example, and I would say that this is the moment where I really fell in love with him. I had been crying all day. It was an anniversary or something. And I had a date with him, which I wanted to go on. But I also thought, I'm a mess. Who wants this? Who is really going to sign up for this today? But I decided that he was an adult and he could make his own decision as long as I was clear about what was going on. So I called him up and I said, I have been crying all day. We have a date tonight, but I don't know how I'm going to be. So it's up to you if you want to get together or not. And he said, I'm okay with that.
Mm.
And I said, and don't try to fix me. There's nothing wrong with me. Even if I cry, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm okay. And he just honored where I was and how I was. Both the fact that I'd been crying all day and the fact that I wanted to go on the date and I wanted to be with him.
Mm. He had the capacity to hold space for it all and not to change it.
Yeah. One of the most powerful things I learned in that time, because honestly, dating and falling in love again was the hardest thing I did. It was devastatingly difficult and incredibly joyful. And the reason it was so hard was that when the joy rose, the grief rose at the same time.
This is important. When the joy rose, the grief rose at the same time.
Yeah.
I think often we feel that and then I'm speaking for myself, and then I back away from that intensity, thinking that something's going wrong.
Yeah, no, there was nothing wrong, but that was what was really happening. The joy and the grief rose at the same time. What I had to do to be fair was when I would have a strange reaction, like don't touch me, because I couldn't trust my own body chemistry. I was used to this one man for 25 years. So you say, well, was there chemistry? My chemistry was out of whack. But I had to ask myself, if something would happen like that, I would have to ask myself, is it me? Is it him? Or is it us? That was so powerful, because then I knew what to do next. If it was me, there was nothing he could do that would fix it.
If it was him.
If it was him, that was a communication. Hey, you're doing this that's annoying me.
If it was us.
If it was us, it was, there's something going on between us that's not working. Let's work it out.
About it, yeah.
But what that did was it kind of kept the lines of communication clean, and it kept out the shame and the blame. Oh, it's your fault. And as a result of it, he and I have this amazing foundation because we were forced to be so honest from the beginning.
Yeah. In the beginning, it's almost like you had to do the center or the central work of a relationship instead of coasting along for like a year or so and being like, well, two human beings who need to interact. But you had to do that work from the beginning to be sustainable.
Absolutely. Because I was not a prize. I mean, I was difficult, not because I meant to be, but because I had just been through this really hard experience. The other thing is that, we live together now. And so he moved into the apartment with the 800 paintings. So it's not put away a few photographs. He lives with my husband's legacy of work. which is amazing. And he is okay with it. But he moved in, and one of the things that's been really difficult is, how do I make space for me, for my work, for my legacy? So I inherited enough work to sell this work could take my whole life. Except I have my own work. That's important. This, how do you re-engage? How do you reinvent yourself? How do you rebuild your networks? This work that I do with people who are grieving. And so one of the big questions, and this is when people are letting go of the things of a person they loved, usually it's not 800 paintings.
Just square foot. A small problem. Wow.
Small problem, right? So I had to sort of draw a line in the sand and say, yes, I will take care of this, but I also have my own work to do. I have my own stuff that I'm doing. But when my boyfriend moved in, we had talked about, moving some furniture around, making space for him so he could feel comfortable. So he moved in. Fortunately, he did not have a lot of stuff. And he said, okay, so now what are we going to move? And I said, what do you mean move? What do you mean change? You're the change. You're all the change I can handle.
Surprise.
Surprise. And then I calmed down and we moved some furniture, but it really has been a process of making space for myself, making space for him. I'm just to the point where I'm really selling his art, my husband's art. But it's taken almost 5 years to get comfortable with that. So
the amazing Flo Mia says, congrats to you for sharing and doing the work to move forward.
Thank you, Flo. Thank you so much.
So you call yourself the bad widow. Why not the good widow?
I love that people have such a hard time with my putting bad and widow together. So bad widow, what I discovered after my husband died was that people had no idea how to deal with me as a widow. And they had a lot of ideas about what the experience I was going through was like that were wrong, outright wrong. And so they would say or do stupid things. And they meant well. I mean, I came through this absolutely convinced of the basic goodness of people. But they were messing it up because they didn't know, because nobody talks about this. Nobody talks about this experience from inside the experience. It's afterwards. There's lots of advice like, how do you release stuff? How do you handle finances? There's very little, how do you communicate what you need when you don't even know what that is? How do you interact with people when you're no longer the same person you were before, but you're in the same body, so they're interacting with you like you were? And so Bad Widow was blowing up all these assumptions, not just going along. So if someone said, very often I got asked, how are you? And in my brain, I would think, well, just lost the man I loved for 25 years, really struggling with two places in, how do you think I am? And I didn't say that, but that was certainly going on in my head. And what I realized is that they were asking that question because they just didn't know a better question to ask. And I couldn't answer it because I couldn't even see a horizon where I would be happy again.
Mm.
And so I said, well, I can't answer that, but I could answer, how are you right now?
Mm.
How are you today? I could answer that because it was short enough.
Mm.
And so Bad Widow was about, that's not actually my experience. This is the experience, and here's how you can actually help. And I started correcting all the wrong assumptions. And I started giving people who wanted to support people who were grieving ways that really helped.
Speaking of Bad Widow, you have a book that's in the process, right?
Yes. Yes, I have a book that's called The Bad Widow Guide to Life After Loss, Moving Through Grief to Live and Love Again. And it is in final edits.
Oh my gosh, congratulations.
Yeah. So it will start pre-selling August 22nd, which is the Sturgeon Moon, because that just entertains me. And then it will launch on Amazon during the Harvest Moon, which is September 20th. So home stretch. And it's a great book.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
So if people want to reach out because they're going through grief, or they have a loved one or a friend and they just don't know what to do, or if they want updates on your book, where should they go?
They should go to badwidow.com. Just go to badwidow.com. Very easy.
That is very easy. I will.
Yeah, very simple. And I would love to talk to you. There are lots of resources on there as well.
And I highly encourage you to reach out and talk to Alison. She is so, as you can tell, she's not only kind and loving, but she has so much perseverance in her, and she can help you slowly find that part in yourself and move forward in your own way.
Exactly. In your own time, at your own pace, on your own terms. Thank you so much for having me, Jason.
Thanks so much, Alison. And let's do a dance. The technology worked.
I know.
Cool. Such a pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
Yes, always a pleasure. Thanks.
Wow. Well, I so value Alison. This is a very intense subject, but she brings authenticity to it, and then also points out the joy in this very challenging process in some places, and it's just so real. I so appreciate her and appreciate you for tuning in, and tune in next week for another awkwardly awesome podcast. And now the outro. And I'm not supposed to say that son of a gun. Oh well, yeah. Here it goes. Thank you.